Mili again, and I'm here for the book reading. I'm sorry because I couldn't come on live for last couple of days, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm here now, so today I'm going to read a couple of chapters from Sense and Sensibility of by Jane Austen. So I hope you will like it and. Let's start. Today's chapter 4. We have already finished chapter 1, 2, and 3, and I hope you enjoyed it. The videos are there so you can see it again if you want to. And today's chapter 4. So let's start. What a pity it is, Elinor, said Marianne, that Edward should have no taste for drawing. No taste for drawing? Replied Elinor. It was surprising. Why should you think so? He does not draw himself, indeed, but he has great pleasure in seeing the performances of other people, and I assure you he is by no means deficient in natural taste, though he has not had opportunities of improving it. Had he ever been in the way of learning, I think he would have drawn very well. He distrusts his own judgment in such matters so much that he is always unwilling to give him opinion on any picture, but he has an innate propriety and simplicity of taste which in general direct him perfectly right. Marian was afraid of offending and said no more on the subject, but the kind of approbation which Elinor described as excited in him but by the drawings of other people was very far from the rapturous delight which, in her opinion, could alone be called taste. Yet, though smiling within herself at the mistake, she honored her sister for that blind partiality to Edward which produced it. I hope, Marian, continued Elinor, you do not consider him as deficient in general taste. Indeed, I think I may say that you cannot, for your behavior to him is perfectly cordial, and if that were your opinion, I'm sure you could never be civil to him. Marian hardly knew what to say. She would not wound the feelings of her sister on any account, and yet to say what she did not believe was impossible. At length she replied, do not be offended, Elinor, if my praise of him is not in everything equal to your senses of his merits. I have not had so many opportunities of estimating the minuter propensities of his mind, his inclinations and tastes, as you have. But I have the highest opinion in the world of his goodness and sense. I think him everything that is worthy and amiable. I'm sure, replied Eleanor with a smile, that his dearest friends could not be dissatisfied with such a commendation as that. I do not perceive how you could express yourself more warmly. Marian was rejoiced to find her sister so easily pleased. Of his sense and his goodness, continued Eleanor, no one can, I think, be in doubt who has seen him often enough to engage in unreserved conversation. The excellence of his understanding and his principles can be counselled only by that shyness which too often keeps him silent. You know enough of him to do justice to his solid oath, but of his miniature propensi- propensities, as you call them, you have, from peculiar circumstances, been kept more ignorant than myself. He and I have been at times thrown a good deal together, while you have been wholly engrossed on the most affectionate principle by my mother, and I have seen a great deal of him, have studied his sentiments, and heard his opinion on subjects of literature and taste, and upon the whole, I venture to pronounce that his mind is well informed, his enjoyment of books exceedingly great, his imagination lively, his observation just and correct. Here, just is the the people who do the justice. He's very kind, he's righteous always, and his taste delicate and pure. His abilities in every respect improve as much upon acquaintance as his manners and person. At first sight, his address is certainly not striking, and his person can hardly be called handsome, till the expression of his eyes, which are uncommonly good, and the general sweetness of his countenance is perceived. At present I know him so well that I think him really handsome, and of or at least almost so. What say you, Marion? I shall very soon think him handsome, Elinor, if I do not now. When you tell me to love him as a brother, I shall no more see imperfection in his face than I now do in his heart. Elinor started at this declaration, and was sorry for the warmth she had been betrayed into in speaking of him. She felt that Edward stood very high in her opinion. She believed the regard to be mutual, but she required greater certainty of it to make Marianne's conviction of their attachment agreeable to her. She knew that what Marianne and her mother conjectured one moment they believed the next, that with them to wish was to hope, and to hope was to expect. She tried to explain the real state of the case to her sister. I do not attempt to deny, said she, that I think very highly of him, that I greatly esteem and I like him. Marian here burst forth with indignation. Esteem him, like him, cold hearted Elinor. Oh, worse than cold hearted, ashamed of being otherwise. Use those words again, and I will leave the room this moment. Elinor could not help laughing. Excuse me, said she, and be assured that I meant no offence to you by speaking in so quite in a way of my own feelings. Believe them to be stronger than I have declared. Believe them, in short, to be such as his merit, and the suspicion, the hope of his affection for me may warrant, without imprudence or folly. But further than this you must not believe. I am by no means assured of his regard for me. There are moments when the extent of it seems doubtful, and till his sentiments are fully known, you cannot wonder at my wishing to avoid any encouragement of my own partiality by believing or calling it more than it is. In my heart, I feel little, scarcely any doubt of his performance, but there are other points to be considered besides his inclination. He is very far from being independent. What his mother really is, we cannot know. But from Fanny's occasional mention of her conduct and opinions, we have never been disposed to think her amiable. And I am very much mistaken if Edward is not himself aware that there would be many difficulties in his way if he were to wish to marry a woman who had not either a great fortune or high rank. Marianne was astonished to find how much the imagination of her mother and herself had outstripped the truth. "And you really are not engaged to him," said she. "Yet it certainly soon will happen, but two advantages will proceed from this delay. I shall not lose you so soon, and Edward will have greater opportunity of improving that nature taste of your favourite pursuit, which must be so indispensably necessary to your future felicity. Oh, if he should be so far stimulated by your genius as to learn to draw himself, how delightful it would be." Elinor had given her real opinion to her sister. She could not consider her partiality for Edward in so prosperous, sorry, I will start it again. This is another paragraph, okay? Elinor had given her real opinion to her sister. She could not consider her partiality for Edward in so prosperous a state as Marianne had believed it. There was at times a want of spirits about him, which, if it did not denote indifference, spoke something almost as unpromising, a doubt of a regard, supposing him to feel it, and need not give him more than inquieted. It would not be likely to produce that dejection of mind which frequently attended him. A more reasonable cause might be caused, sorry, a more reasonable cause might be found in the dependent situation which forbade the indulgence of his affection. She knew that his mother neither behaved to him so as to make his home comfortable at present, nor to give him any assurance that he might form a home for himself without strictly attending to her views for his aggrandizement. Aggrandizement. That's a new word I came across. I mean, I came across before, but it's a new word again. That's if you read something, it's always new. New words come to your mind, and I I almost forgot that word before, but I reminded again. So I'll continue. With such a knowledge as this, it was impossible for Elinor to feel easy on the subject. She was far from the depending on that result of his preference of her, which her mother and sisters still considered as certain. Nay, the longer they were together, the more doubtful seemed the nature of his regard, and sometimes for a few painful minutes she believed it to be no more than friendship. But whatever might really be its limit, it was enough when perceived by his sister to make her uneasy, and at the same time, which was still more common, to make her uncivil. She took the first opportunity of affronting her mother-in-law on the occasion, talking to her so expressively of her brother's great expectations, of Mrs. Ferrars' resolution that both her sons should marry well, and of danger attending any young woman who attempted to draw him in, that Mrs. Dashwood could neither pretend to be unconscious nor endeavor to be calm. Calm means like quiet, peaceful. She won't get it, she won't let it slide away. She gave her an answer which marked her contempt and instantly left the room, resolving that whatever might be the inconvenience or expense of so sudden a removal, her beloved Elinor should not be exposed another week to such insinuation. In this state of her spirits, a letter was delivered to her from the post, which contained a proposal particularly well timed. It was the offer of a small house on very easy terms belonging to a relation of her own, a gentleman of consequence and property Shire, in Devonshire. The letter was from this gentleman himself and written in the true spirit of friendly accommodation. He understood that she was in need of a dwelling, and though the house he now offered her was merely a cottage, he assured that everything should be done to it which he might think necessary if the situation pleased her. He earnestly pressed her, after giving the particulars of the house and garden, to come with her daughter to Barton Park, the place of his own residence, from whence she might judge herself whether Barton Cottage, for the houses were in the same parish, could by any alteration be made comfortable to her. He seemed really anxious to accommodate them, and the whole of his letter was written in so friendly a style as could not fail of giving pleasure to his cousin, more especially at a moment when she was suffering under the cold and unfailing behavior of her nearer connections. She needed no time for deliberation or inquiry. Her resolution was formed as she read. The situation of Barton, in a country so far distant from Sussex as Devonshire, which but a few hours before would have been a sufficient objection to outweigh every possible advantages belonging to the place, was an object of desire. Was now its first recommendation. To quit the neighborhood of Norland was no longer an evil, it was an object of desire. It was a blessing in comparison of the misery of continuing her daughter in law's guest, and to remove for ever from that beloved place would be less painful than to inhabit or to visit it while such a woman was its mistress. She instantly wrote Sir John Middleton her acknowledgment of his kindness and her acceptance of his proposal, and then hastened to show both letters to her daughters, and that she might be secure of their approbation before her answer were sent. Elinor had always thought it would be more prudent for them to settle at some distance from Norland than immediately amongst their present acquaintance. On that head, therefore, it was not for her to oppose her mother's intention of removing into Devonshire. The house, too, as described as Sir John, was on so simple a scale, and the rent so uncommonly moderate, as to leave her no right of objection on either point. and therefore, though it was not a plan which brought any charm to her fancy, though it was a removal from the vicinity of Norland, beyond her wishes, and she made no attempt to dissuade her mother from sending her letter of acquiescence. Oh, it was a great read. I loved it. Actually, I missed it. I will start chapter 5 now. I hope you don't get bored and keep enjoying. Hope so. No sooner was her answer dispatched than Mrs. Dashwood indulged herself in the pleasure of announcing to her son in law and his wife that she was provided with a house and should incommode them no longer than till everything were ready for her inhabiting it. They heard her with surprise. Mrs. John Dashwood said nothing, but her husband civilly hoped that she would not be settled far from Norland. She had great satisfaction in replying that she was going to Devonshire. Edward turned hastily towards her on hearing this, and in a voice of surprise and concern, which required no explanation to her, and repeated, "Devonshire? Are you indeed going there, so far from hence? And to what part of it?" She explained the situation. It was within 4 miles northward of Exeter. "It is but a cottage," she continued, "but I hope to see many of my friends in it. A room or two can easily be added, and if my friends find no difficulty in travelling so far to see me, I am sure I will find none in accommodating them." She concluded with a very kind invitation to Mr. and Mrs. John Dashwood to visit her at Barton, and to Edward she gave one with still greater affection, though her late conversation with her daughter-in-law had made her resolve on remaining at Norland no longer than was unavoidable. It had not produced the smallest effect on her in that point to which it principally tended. To separate Edward and Elinor was as far from being her object as ever, and she wished to show Mrs. John Dashwood by this pointed invitation to her brother how totally she disregarded her disapprobation of the match. Mr. John Dashwood told his mother again and again how exceedingly sorry he was, and she had taken a house at such a distance from Norland as to prevent his being of any service to her in removing her furniture. He really felt consciously vexed on the occasion, for the very exertion to which he had limited the performance of his promise to his father was by this arrangement rendered impracticable. The furniture was all sent round by water. It chiefly consisted of household linen, plate, china, and books, with an handsome pianoforte of Marianne's. Pianoforte, pianoforte. I mean, a piano. It's a very good addition to a home. Mrs. John Dashwood saw the packages depart with a sigh. She could not help feeling it hard that as Mrs. Dashwood's income would be so trifling in comparison with their own. She would have any handsome article of furniture. Mrs. Dashwood took the house for a 12th month. It was ready furnished, and she might have immediate possession. No difficulty arose on either side in their agreement, and she waited only for the disposal of her effects at Norland and to determine her future household before she set off for the West. And these she was exceedingly rapid in the performance of everything that interested her was soon done. The horses which were left her by her husband had been sold soon after his death, and an opportunity now offering of disposing of her carriage. She agreed to sell that likewise at the earnest advice of her eldest daughter. For the comfort of her children, had she consulted only her own wishes, she would have kept it. But the discretion of Elinor prevailed. Her wisdom, too, limited the number of their servants to three, two maids and a man, with whom they were speedily provided from amongst those who had formed their establishment at Norland. The man and one of the maids were sent off immediately into Devonshire to prepare the house for their mistress's arrival, for as Lady Middleton was entirely unknown to Mrs. Dashwood, she preferred going directly to the cottage to being a visitor at Burton Park, and she relied so undoubtingly on Sir John's description of the house as to feel no curiosity to examine it herself till she entered it as her own. Her eagerness to be gone from Norland, sorry, her eagerness to gone from Norland was preserved from diminution by the evident satisfaction of her daughter-in-law in the prospects of her removal, a satisfaction which was but feebly attempted to conceal under a cold invitation to her daughter to defer her departure. Now was the time when her son-in-law's promise to his father might, with particular propriety, be fulfilled, since he had neglected to do it on first coming on the state. Their quitting his house might be looked on as the most suitable period for its accomplishment, but Mrs. Dashwood began shortly to give over every hope of the kind, and to be convinced, from the general drift of his discourse, that his assistance extended no further than their maintenance for 6 months at Norland. He so frequently talked of the increasing expenses of housekeeping and of the perpetual demands upon his purse, which a man of any conscience or consequences in the world was beyond calculation exposed it, that he seemed rather to stand in need of more money himself than to have any design of giving money away. I mean, I will explain later, but in a very few weeks from the day which brought Sir John Middleton's first letter to Norland, everything was so far settled in the future abode as to enable Mrs. Dashwood and her daughters to begin their journey. Many were the tears shed by them in their last adieus. To a place so much beloved, dear, dear Norland, said Marianne, as she wandered alone before the house on the last evening of their being there. When shall I cease to regret you? When learn to feel a home elsewhere? Happy house. Could you know what I suffer in now viewing you from this spot, from whence perhaps I may view you no more, and you, here well known trees, but you will continue the same. No leaf will decay because we are removed, nor any branch become motionless, although we can observe you no longer. No, you will continue the same, unconscious of the pleasure or the regret you occasion, and insensible of any change in those who walk under your shade, but who will remain to enjoy you. So this is end of chapter 5. So the most amazing thing here is, oh, I cried. I'm actually being so emotional about it. For the last paragraph, Marian said that nothing will change even though we are removed from this place. Nothing will change. Yes, nothing will change. Everything will go on and on because that's life. That's life. Keep going. But for us, for people, we always remember things, and which sometimes painful, sometimes very enjoyable. But when we go for a nostalgic memory, we feel the nostalgia in our bones, and that's amazing to feel in a way. So, chapter 5, till chapter 5, it was the life, ups and downs. So many things happened till chapter 5, but when chapter 6 begins, the new journey begins in the life of Mrs. Dashwood and his daughters. So we will begin the journey with them, but not today. Maybe tomorrow or maybe at some other time. I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you soon. Thank you.